So we've got a Metabo HPT. It's an NV45AB2 coil nailer. So these nailers have been around forever. They were sold under the Hitachi name for a very long time. I've worked on them for, oh, heck, I don't even know, probably 15, almost 20 years. I'm going to show you how to rebuild these. I actually started this, got down all the way to the nose and everything. That's where this O-ring here came from. But then I realized, hey, there's not a video out there on doing this. So we use the Reliability Provin Hitachi. It's a KT-HA-104. They also make a KT-HA, I think it's a -910. That's got the ball for the trigger and a few of the other O-rings. It might have the piece for the cylinder, the outside of the cylinder or something in it. It's got a few of the other O-rings, but 9 times out of 10, this kit here fixes everything you need. This one is sluggish. He says every now and again it'll shoot every other nail and things like that. The piston was stuck all the way, or the driver was stuck all the way down when it came in. I reset it, which basically all you have to do is hold the nose in and hold the trigger while you plug it in. Obviously make sure there's no nails in it at that point, but sometimes that'll reset the trigger up and kind of reset the whole gun. Many times it is needed at the end of this once you complete the rebuild, so beware of that. So what we do is we clean everything up when we've got them apart, and then we use a high temperature silicone grease on them. You can use something like a pass load lubricating oil or something to that effect, but this Chemplex really stays in there for a very long time. So that's what you want. You want something that's going to give it good lube and stay lubed for a long period, as opposed to just coming out as soon as you get it pieces of those shingles up through it, like most things will. It takes an H4 hex to take basically everything apart on the gun. So we like to just take the top off first. Four of them. Cap comes off. Now you want to be careful when you take that cap off that you don't break the head gasket here. Make sure that that's in good shape when you put it back on. If not, you'll get leaking around the outside. Normally the only issue this causes, it can cause bad feeding or something down like that, down through these small holes, but normally it's not going to happen. Normally the only issue you get is that it'll leak out the side if you're having an issue with it. Now up in the top here, you can take 2 bolts out, and there's another gasket up underneath, and there's a little plastic piece that moves up and down. We're not going to do that today, but you can do that if you want to. Now to get the top ring here out, you've got to put the old ones back in. And what I've always liked to do is go ahead and put those back in, and then just take a pair of needle nose pliers and then kind of hold it at the edge and pull the whole thing up and out. So there's an O-ring on the outside, both places. One on the outside, one on the inside. That's the only thing you'd ever need needle nose for on this. Everything else is pretty good shape. Now on the main cylinder, it'll come out. You can pull it straight up and out. Now if it's really stuck down in there or anything like that, you can go ahead and put like a piece of something around it and pull it out with pliers, but you want to be sure not to ding your aluminum. This is just aluminum that's coming all through here. You want to make sure that you don't mar that up at all. From there, the whole ring on the inside will come straight out, and all you've got to do, I usually just grab it and I'll push with my thumbs around the outside edge. Now it does have to come out even. If it gets candy wampus at all, you can push the part that's furthest up kind of back down in and pull it the rest of the way. Got a couple O-rings around the outside and 2 around the inside here. So from there, you can see your driver assembly, but you don't want to try to pull that out. It's got a little plastic piece down in the bottom here that holds it all together. So we're going to go ahead and take the 2 off the feeder cover. Now these are the real short ones. You want to keep those separate because that's where they've got to go back into. From there, if you use a long H4, you can get down in and get this one. This is kind of the most difficult one to get to. The rest of them come out pretty stinking easy. But I usually just like setting these off to the side, just how they are. Now that frees everything there with the H4s up. We've got one on the other side that is just a Phillips head and a washer. Now it does have a nut that'll fall out a lot of times, like that one just did, that sits in a little groove here. So this sits just down in the groove. You can either put that back down in there or wait until you're reassembling it, but you want to make sure that that stays in that groove. Now this whole assembly just pulls out and off at that point. Now there is a little rubber boot down in here, so that could come off on either side, but that's where it goes back to when you're putting everything back together. Now you do have the whole feeder assembly. I'm not going to worry about that right this second. We will rebuild it though. This whole assembly just comes up and off. So if you tip it forward and out, that whole assembly is off of there. Now to go back on, it's a little bit more difficult, but it just flips right back up on there. So not a big deal whatsoever to get this all off in one assembly at one time. Then from there, the whole bumper, you do want to pay attention to the gasket here. If it gets stuck or ripped or anything like that, it looks like this one ripped just a tiny bit out at the outside of the thread. I'm not going to worry about it though, it's not going to leak. But be careful not to rip that as you're taking it off. Now this is your piston driver assembly. It's got that plastic piece I was talking about here that won't allow it to pull out the backside without ripping it real bad. But then it's got the bumper. Then you've got an O-ring on there. Now the first thing I like to do is just go ahead and clean everything up. So the top assembly, I like to run a poker all the way around because this is where it seals in this groove. You want to make sure there's no pieces of anything up through here. If there's pieces of anything, get those out because those are going to lodge free at some point and they're going to scratch everything. So I like to get those all cleaned up. And then you can just set everything after it's clean off to the side on another towel. So we're going to get the driver O-ring here out. Good. And then we're just going to clean up down in there and get all that old stuff out of there. Get it all the way clean. Nice and easy. Okay. I like to take all the O-rings off at once just because I do know where they go. Now if you don't know where they go, you could do this all at one point in time. But I'll show you how to match them up without that. Again, just kind of take a towel and wipe all the way around there, get all that nasty stuff out. Now you can use a pass load tool cleaner or like a QD electronic cleaner on this, but it's not necessary. That stuff's super expensive. We used to use it, but then you burn through, you know, $10, $12 worth of stuff every gun you do just to clean all the stuff up that one 50-cent towel could have done. So now if you keep them all off to the side in different spots where you know 4 came off of this one, 2 came off of this one type thing, it's pretty easy to match up the O-rings also while cleaning them at the same time. But I just take a poker and get them all out of there. It's really easy with a poker to get that all freed up. This one's a little more difficult to get 100% clean with just a towel because you've got all these spots down in the back. So just get those cleaned out like such. I figured I'd just grab a can of QD electronic cleaner here and just kind of, it does work really well, yes. Doesn't hurt any of the newer O-rings or anything. It doesn't leave a residue. It does make it quicker, yes, but it is not needed. You don't have to do it that way at all. But just make sure all the stuff is cleaned up off of here real good. Down in all your channels and nooks, because anything you don't get cleaned up off of here, that's going to just go right back into those new O-rings, mix right back in with that new grease or new lube you're using. Next thing you know, you're going to be right back in the same boat with worn out O-rings. A lot of times these will pull big chunks of shingles and stuff up in them too, so very common to open them up and find a big chunk of metal or whatever it may be, shingle, up inside of them. Go ahead and just blow that off one more time here. I'm going to use just some, get some stuff out of those corners real quick. All right, it's looking pretty good. Throw it over to the side. Now, if you use anything else for cleaner, if you use carb cleaner or anything like that, you're going to want to make sure all that residue's off there, because you don't want that residue ruining everything. There's a spring that just sits on the bottom, and then there's also an O-ring that sits on the outside here. Now, you want to make sure these holes aren't plugged or don't have anything stuck in them. A lot of times up underneath there, you'll catch a bunch of pieces of something in it. This one looks pretty good. Not too worried about it at this point, but... And this cylinder looks pretty good. In many cases, all along here where it seats is scratched all to heck. Now, if it's scratched all to heck, you can use a real fine sandpaper and sand that around. Just make sure it's even all the way around while you're doing it. But this one's clean as all get out, so that's good. That's 100% solid, real good looking. But again, that sandpaper will just kind of give you a better seal around it and give you more power out of it if it's all scratched up. I always like to just leave that on there. If you forget that, you'll know it once you put it back together, trust me. Done it plenty of times. Seems to be the one thing that everybody seems to forget. Now up in here, we've got all kinds of buildup. So you want to spray that out real good. Of course, you probably don't want to do it right over the parts that you just cleaned. It doesn't tend to work out real good that way. Stuff flying all over the place now, apparently. Thought I turned that compressor off, but I guess I didn't. Re-clean as needed. Get them all dirtied up. Now there is one up in the inside here. So this is the original one that I took out, one of these that I took out from up in there. You just want to take that out of the notch, and you also want to make sure it's not all marred up around in here. If it is, again, you can take light sandpaper and you can sand it down. But if it's real bad, it's not going to seal right, and then this is what affects your feeding real bad. If it's skipping real bad, you want to pay attention to that O-ring or that bottom of that cylinder down there, because a lot of times that's what's causing it. Wipe out the whole inside. All right. I'm going to go ahead here and remove the feeder assembly. Oh, it looks like the feeder spring is broken. So this feeder spring here is supposed to come over and across, so I'm gonna have to grab a new one of those. I've got them in back. But to open this up, you just take your keeper off. Take your keeper off there. Your pin comes through and out, and then your feeder spring will come up and out. There are two different ways it can go on there. You only want it the one way. I always like to keep this separate also, because if you don't know where these came from. When you pull that off, be careful of the gasket. There is a gasket there that seals everything. So that just comes off. You want to clean that up also. And this just comes straight and out. So these here, I always like to match this one up, because there's a couple that are about the same size in there, in that kit. I'm gonna grab that feeder spring real quick, and then we'll come back. I'll match all these up and we'll put this thing back together. So we're back here. We did get a feeder spring, and then we also went ahead and opened the kit. And we also got an oversized piston O-ring. So this one's just a tiny bit bigger than the original. And what that does is it leaves us a little bit around the outside there in order for that piston to stay up top. These things are known for just dropping down, so you don't want that to happen. We're gonna go ahead and get the O-rings here all switched out. And I think that's that's not the right one. I like to match these up because they are kind of the same size as the original ones. Now the one that's white and gray, I believe, goes on the back. I believe that's where it goes. Yep, it matches up there. All right. Now the main one, this doesn't usually get too terribly dirty down in here, but you still want to clean it out real good. I didn't get that back one quite as good as I would have liked to, but and there's the one that goes to it. It's a little bit different. It's not exactly one that you've got to worry about too much. And then this one, all right, there it is. Now I found the one. It's the blue and green in this kit anyway. And it goes up front. And I like to, you always get a notch there where your feeder spring sat. So I like to flip these upside down before I put them back together. That way it doesn't keep notching out of there. So as you put it back in, the part that was the feeder spring was like this. We're going to flip it 180 of that and put it back in. Now we're good. You do want to have the feeder down in there first. I didn't clean this up real well. You want to make sure both tabs are here. A lot of times these little tabs will get broken off the ends. If those tabs aren't there, it won't feed right either. So, throw it down in there. All right, good to go. I like to put it about there and then go ahead and get your feeder spring and everything put on. Make sure your tabs are down in there like they should be. From the bottom side. You have to hold it kind of tight in there and push it through. And again, make sure those tabs, they stay down in those tabs as you're pushing them through. You can use one of your good keepers here from the kit after you've got it all the way through. And that's the real thick one that just pushes straight on there and it holds everything together. So that's back in there. Now this should pop up. You should pop right back up once you hit it. All right, get that one finished clean up. Wow, I thought I had all these cleaned up pretty well, but apparently I didn't. So again, grease the outside, put it back together there. And we've got the two real short ones. Oh, that's not one of them. See, they're different lengths. The ones for these are a little bit longer than the ones that go down in the door. If you put the wrong ones in there, you're not gonna have an easy time getting the ones back on the door. These are the ones that are a little bit longer. I've got them all mixed up here apparently, so luckily I know what goes where, because otherwise it'd be in a whole nother issue right now. Grease everything real good. Never gonna hurt you to have too much grease on this thing, especially this cylinder. The bottom gets greased real good, and then all down through, all down around the outside. These are all parts that are going to make contact on this gun. Everything there is going to make contact. All right, set it over to the side. And it doesn't matter how much you clean it, you're going to get a little bit of color to it. You know, people may say, oh, well, look how dirty his fingers are. Well, guess what? That's just some color. I've got them cleaned off real well. I've washed them twice. It doesn't matter what you do. You're still going to get a little bit of color to that grease almost instantly as you're putting this back together. I like to do the big ones first. Grab those, get them out of the way, then get the smaller ones. I think it's the smallest one that goes on the inside here, if I remember correctly, and it is. So it's the smallest of the small. I guess I should say the smallest of the large ones. It goes around the inside. Ooh, that's not right. That's not the right one. I say that, and that's not the right one at all. That must be the one that goes on the inside here. They should fit nice and snug in there. Yep, that's it. Guess it's the one that's just a tiny bit bigger. That'd be my pink one. My pink one's gonna go up in the front. Now again, if you forget this one, it will not feed right. Gotta just kind of poke it around as you go through. And then you've got two left. The two that are left are the ones that go in your big top piece. Right here. And it's kind of hard. You got to just work it around to get them up through there. They like to poke out at every chance they get. So work them around. Don't force anything, but you don't want to try to use a screwdriver or anything and pinch these things or damage them at all while you're putting them in there either. So they're not too terrible to get back in there. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and put this, the part that goes all the way through sits at the downwardmost part. So that's gonna sit down towards the magazine as you're putting this all back together, just like such. And I like to hold it from the back side and kind of hold it up as I'm putting the other assembly in. And if this comes off, it just goes right back on. You do want to make sure your spring's here. That's a very important part. If the spring's not there, then it could be hit accidentally and it could cause a misfire. So we've got it all together. You hold it together, get down through, and you can take that off to make it easier. You can take this pin off. I don't really worry about it whatsoever. I just, as I'm coming up, we kind of fit everything together, push it down through, and then you push everything together real light, and now you can put the side pieces back on. These are your bumpers. They just kind of help protect the gun. These things, you got to realize that they're, oop, that's the top bumpers. We want the side bumpers here. Those are the pieces that kind of help the gun from taking a beating. You know, a lot of times the guns will fall off the roof numerous times, and I mean, some of them numerous times a day, depending on who's operating them. You know, you get a new guy up there and he may drop the gun a couple times every day. It's hard telling, you know. These guns take a beating because they're high up in the air and you don't know who's using them, but I am not going to rebuild the trigger on this thing. Now, there's a bunch of reasons for that. I've rebuilt hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these, and I've maybe 2 or 3 times had issues with the triggers or feeding or something like that. It's almost always an issue with the other O-rings, not the feeders. So, not the triggers. It's almost an issue with the other O-rings. Almost never the trigger. So the balls in those do go bad sometimes. It's pretty easy to take out. You just take the pin out here. This assembly comes out. This piece unscrews, and then everything just pops out of there. But again, it's something that almost never happens, so I'm not going to worry about showing it to you. I like to put even just a little bit more grease on that bottom piece before, well, I guess I want to put my other pieces back in there before I do it wrong here. This piece goes down in. If you lube it up around the outside, it makes it a little easier. And it just goes straight down in. All right. And then your main assembly goes down in there. Now you've got to kind of move this and back and forth to get it to snap down in there real good. Otherwise, it doesn't like to go. It's a lot, I've done this a lot of times, but it's a lot more difficult than what it's looking right now, I can tell you that, with getting that main assembly down in there. Now it should pop back up if all this grease and stuff wasn't here. So that's why normally when you rebuild it, you need to reset it the first time you plug it in. It's just going to leak air. So you want to make sure that there's no nails in it that first time that you plug it in. Anytime you rebuild a nail gun, you want to make sure there's no nails in it when you first plug it in. You don't want to misfire. You don't want an accident. So, get your head gasket on there, right? I'm gonna get everything just started real quick. Okey-doke. Oop, almost went sideways there a little bit. You always want to get all 4 of them started, or all however many on each area before you tighten them down, because if you tighten them up and that, you're going to strip something out. This black piece, I like to take it off and put it in here first. I don't know why. I think it was difficult one time when I did it the other way without doing it that way, so I've done it that way ever since. Again, I'm not really sure why, but I know it's the easiest way, that's for sure. So we've greased them up real well the whole time, putting everything back together. Again, if you don't have grease, you can use just some regular old tool oil of any kind is going to be better than nothing. Make sure everything's cleaned out from the back side on this. If you don't, you will run into an issue where all those shingles that are stuck up in there, and there will be shingles stuck up in there. This is a roofing nailer. Make no doubt that there will be shingles in there if you've used it for roofing instead of, some people use these guns for flooring also, but the majority of them are roofers that are using them. So when you plug it back in order to reset it, you hold it against something like wood and pull the trigger and plug it in. Now, you don't want to hold it against metal. That's not good on it. But if I plug it in right now, well, I guess it reset on its own there, but the driver is still down. Normally, though, you'll have to reset it in order to get the gun to operate properly. So I don't hear any leaks or anything like that. You want to just take a moment to double check everything. You do want to check these door springs also. They should spring back. They shouldn't be broken. Those do break quite a bit. Oop, I guess I want that closed before that. Now we're gonna go over here and test this thing out, see how it works. We got just some good old piece of a pallet here. Came in on a shipment. Go ahead and just shouldn't have any misses. You shouldn't have any spots where you're shooting a blank. Now, if you're holding it at an angle, you will get some up and stuff like that sometimes, but if you're holding it solid, it should shoot every time. And this will shoot blank, so after you're done, you'll just get blank shot out of it because I don't have anything else left in it. So this thing's working perfect. This is one of the most common nail guns out there. In my opinion, one of the best nail guns out there. Now, there are a lot of moving parts to this gun. It takes quite a bit to rebuild it and things like that, but in my opinion, best roofing nailer they make. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.